Inside the GM Studios halls, tabletop games where nightmares creep, in a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss, where dreams shatter. Inside the GM Studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold, in the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Why, hello there out in electric internet land. Welcome to the side question episode of Inside the GM Studio, where we field questions from mostly Reddit. I am your host, David.
I'm Matt.
I am going to get a die.
Every time.
No, not every time. Shut up. Shut up.
1 out of 3 times.
You're a liar. You're a liar. This guy's a great big phony. I'm going to roll this die like it's something to do. And I'm going to get an 18. Ooh. And Matt's going to give me a question, and we're going to fire from the hip.
Okay. Number 18 comes from Otherwise Fall 4291 at our Ask Game Masters with the title, short and sweet, but no punctuation. What do you think all ideas and advice is welcome? I'm thinking of doing, oh boy, I'm going to read it. I'm thinking of doing one where it's a survival campaign where a kingdom is paying the party to go adventure on an uninhabited continent and to map it out and find sites for a new city and towns. On the journey, they will be going back and forth between the continents and diving into ancient civilizations' ruins. Fights between the natives that live nomadic lives so they don't have towns or cities. I'm guessing, I'm going to kind of sum it up here, because I've actually thought about running a campaign like this, or at least a part of an adventure like this, where a nation leader, a king, it could be even, down a little bit more. Hell, it could just be a military captain or something that has hired the party to go to an uncharted new land and go and adventure there, and then come back with reports, map it out, write down whatever you find, yada yada, bring it back to us. And it's makes for like a nice little survival campaign, really, where they, if you take them away from the land that they know, the towns, the shops, everything, now they have to live off the land. Now they got to make sure that they find a good place to sleep at night. I've thought about this. I thought it might be a cool idea after I did Tomb of Annihilation. That was kind of like that, where they wanted it to be a little more survival, and they made it fun, like during the night when they were camping outside. But they had like spots for them to at least find food if they needed to. They could always go back to the village, shop there. So I want something where they're far, far away, and they have to rely on their skills, being able to live off the land, things like that. But I'm thinking that's kind of what this asker is asking. But do you have anything to add on a survival campaign like that?
Well, the Isle of Dread comes to mind, because the premise of that adventure is just that the party is shipwrecked, and now they're just in this new environment. So, firstly, you would probably need to make sure that you have the sort of party that is largely autonomous, because the whole notion of an exploration discovery based campaign is that they're there for kind of like vague goals, right? It's not a specific thing. You're going here to find this item, to kill this person, to clear these bad guys.
It's not a quest for a MacGuffin.
Right. It's not a quest. It's not really a quest at all. It's a kind of information gathering excursion.
Yeah.
And so that can be fun for largely autonomous parties if you try to provide a lot of texture and variety. frankly, stuff like this tends to be a lot of work up front because you need to make sure that every area of the uncharted wilderness or the uncharted world has something there. There's no
Hmm.
like the party is going to this dungeon now and I'm going to prep that segment of the dungeon and have an idea of what comes after, but it doesn't need to be all the way fleshed out. You have to have basically all of the things fairly fleshed out from the get-go. And that requires a lot of upfront work. But the good news is that once it's done, then it's just a matter of kind of executing it. There's really not any prep week to week. But if it's going to be a true sandbox, you need to have every aspect fleshed out kind of in advance, and then it's just a matter of kind of freshening up your memory of how everything plays out in each different region.
I was
Because
going to
there's no
ask you because this made me think. This is like as true a sandbox as you can get. Would you agree?
pretty much, with the exception of, I would say it wouldn't be as true of a sandbox because a really true sandbox adventure would be one where the party doesn't have any guidance as to like what they're doing.
Hmm.
Like they're just exploring different aspects of a certain world with their own goals in mind, not someone else's goals. So
True.
this is
True that.
a vague scaffolding where presumably there would be at the outset of the adventure, there would be some role playing with whoever the person in charge, the person that wants this area charted out. And throughout that role playing encounter, or you could even just do it as like an info dump at the beginning of the adventure if you wanted to get right into the action and obviate the role playing encounter and the travel to that region. If you didn't want to have, if nothing interesting happens during the role playing encounter, it's just prescriptive. Like they just say, here are the things I want to know, and they send you off, and nothing happens on the travel, then start at the uncharted area.
Hmm.
But if the whole fun of it is kind of the PCs trying to get some understanding as to what the person in charge wants to know, maybe they want to know about the topography because they are considering annexing or settling lands. And so they want to know where the mountains, where the jungle, where the rivers are. How close are they to bodies of water for ports and all that?
Hmm.
Maybe they want to know if there's any hostile natives or humanoid infestations or beasts. They want to know about the dangers. They want to know about the topography. Maybe they would prefer to know more about the socio-political dynamics between tribes, between what little civilization there is. Perhaps they would want to know what the infrastructure is like. Maybe they would want to know, maybe they're searching for resources. They want to know if there is, mountains with valuable ore or ancient civilizations and certain aspects that have been abandoned that could be mined for resources, or they want to know, again, like a port or a river that would help. So you could have a fun role-playing encounter that establishes that back and forth where the PCs are trying to gain understanding, and then that would give them some like vague goals of what it is they're trying to achieve.
Hmm.
But you could just gloss over that and just say he wants to know these 5 things and where they are and what they're like, and set any sort of goals accordingly, right? Like,
Hmm.
we're thinking about settling this corner of the uncharted territory, so we need to know what's there. And if there are any hostile humanoids or beasts, then you need to kind of clear and make that area safe, to try to gain understanding from the locals, or even maybe prime the locals for an upcoming, I wouldn't call it invasion, but annexation, if these are more primitive peoples. And then the fun comes from the party choosing which things to pursue, how to pursue them, and then what method of, I guess, settlement they're looking for. Are they going for more a hostile takeover? Are they going for more settling otherwise unsettled lands? Are they going for some sort of diplomacy where they might want to work with the neighboring tribes or whatever? Are the neighboring tribes hostile? Are they hostile to one another? And if so, what are those dynamics like? Um, so there's some fun opportunities in there to allow the PCs to kind of explore the island as they see fit, and you can always rest assured that they're pursuing things that they'll find fun, that they will, prioritize things in the order of importance and the order of fun. Then you can even shake things up a little bit if you wanted to have a couple of plot twists where maybe the person that's giving them the assignment is not totally forthcoming with what their intentions are, right? Maybe they're saying like, "Oh, like go and find out," or the PC is thinking, "Oh, we're going to go on this diplomatic mission and kind of like extend an olive branch to these primitive peoples, and with the promise that maybe they're going to, the Lord's Alliance is going to come in here and kind of help civilize and build the infrastructure." When in reality, they're just like, look, they just want to know what their capabilities, where their
Yeah.
allegiances are, so they can play them
Oh,
off one another,
my
wipe them
mind
off
went
the
there as
fucking
well.
map.
Yeah.
Right, right. And so there's some fun to be had there, um, especially if you make it that the PCs kind of discover some of this as they're adventuring, and maybe even their loyalties could shift. Maybe they become more
Yep.
sympathetic to
Yeah.
the natives, or they don't want to disrupt the ecosystem in some way. There could be kind of, if your players are much more, let's say, interested in kind of like broader societal themes. There could
Hmm.
be like kind of an environmentalism theme there. There could be a cultural theme, like maybe this is a pristine area that has all these cultural relics in it, and they don't want to see them disturbed, or maybe they don't care, or maybe they're just mercenaries. So there's a lot of opportunity for character growth, especially if it's going to be a pretty long endeavor where this is like the bulk of a campaign where they're exploring different areas. And it also gives a lot of opportunities for, as you said, varied encounter types, right? You have certain role playing and social dynamics with the dollops of civilization, and perhaps even the what there might exist on the fringe of civilization, right? Like
Hmm.
this is a very not super civilized place, so the edges of those civilizations are going to be kind of more in a gray area. Just because a group of people or monsters or whatever are savages doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad. And so what's the harmony there? That's great for role playing, that's great for social encounters, but then obviously there's a lot of unexplored wilderness, so you have a lot of opportunities for cool exploration where the players are interacting with uh, maybe differing environments, environmental hazards, small interludes where you can give the region texture and flavor. And then obviously, if there's hostile portions, there's opportunities for dungeon crawls, or even like wilderness encounters, wilderness battles.
Oh, he's almost
Uh,
there.
what's that?
I'm making it a point now, because we've made it pretty obvious that neither of us really enjoy hex crawls.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna find one where I say, David, do you think this warrants a hex crawl?
It it probably does, but the beauty of it is that you can push in and pull out the scope as it warrants. So
Right. This
you
would
could
be
have,
the only circumstance where I would say, you know what, this sounds like a good opportunity for a hex crawl.
yeah, it probably could, depending on how big the region is. You just
Mm.
have a little map and you go, this is what they do in the Isle of Dread. They give you a map, and the coastal hexes are all filled in, like what topography they are and any major features. But the interior is completely blank, and the idea is that you get that map and you go, okay, this is a jungle square, and you draw a little jungle thing, or you color it a certain color
Mm.
or whatever. You The scale matters here. If each hex is 3 square miles, that's a pretty small area where you
Hmm.
can, or 1 square mile or one hexagonal mile or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Uh, you fill it in and you have the PCs explore. But, if each hex is going to take, its own quest, then you don't want to have 100 hexes, right?
Right.
Because that's
Yeah.
just going to be too much of a grind. And especially because it's largely going to be like most of the island, if it's rural, it's not going to be populated by anything of interest, and having each character, having a character's map out each hex
Yeah.
as they come across it is not going to be likely. But the easier way is to go, okay, there's say 50 hexes, and then, 8 or 10 of them have points of interest. And then when you get to that point of interest or traveling along it, you should be able to, depending on visibility, see what the adjacent hexes are too.
Hmm.
And so really, every time you get to a point of interest, let's say you get to a little village, you should be able to see every hex that touches that and see if there's a point of interest in it, what the topography is like, and then that'll like kind of populate it on the map, and the PCs can either go to the next thing or they can foray out to the next point of interest that they hear about, word of mouth, or they get a map about, or they stumble across, and then it'll quickly populate the map so that you're not making it a real slog. That's the way I think a hex crawl should play out ideally. The way it played out previously was tantamount to like mapping each dungeon room as you come into it, and that is no fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you're the DM trying to, well, especially when you're Nate Higley. I know you're listening, you fucker. That makes very intricate, weird maps.
Right.
And he doesn't
The
give
room
you a
is shaped
copy
like
of
a
it.
gear with
Yeah.
8 spokes, and you're like,
Yep.
fucking dude, really?
And you're trying to map it out, and he's trying to describe it, but it's very difficult. And it's just like, you know what? Just let me look at that. Give
Yeah.
me yours. I want to look at it.
Yeah, that's the
The
way to do
way
it.
that I have done hex crawls in the past, I haven't done many of them because I'm not a big fan. But something like this, where everything is brand new, it's uncharted areas, I think it gives the fun. Is I'll tell my players for every, like if you said if every hex is 1 square mile, that's a pretty good one. I say for every 8 hexes that you travel, I'm gonna roll, for a random event. It's not just an encounter; it's an event that could happen. I'm gonna roll for an event, uh, or it could be every 5, depending on how active you want there to be, like an encounter or event through your hex crawl. David, I also wanted to ask you, when you get into something like this, and you know that your campaign that you just designed and possibly built this whole thing to make it a sandbox, so all this prep for this island or wherever that they're going, do you tell your players beforehand, this next leg or this next adventure that I have set up is going to be survival? These are the things that you should look to doing, or should you just kind of pop it on there and hope that fun is had and learn through play?
Well, again, it would probably depend on how autonomous the characters in the game are going to be. If they're given a kind of a prescriptive thing, then you might even have like an interlude where it's like they get the pitch and then they have some time for prep. You might even, if you wanted to like empower them to have the tools that they need, you would probably do that like prior to character creation, so they know what kind of characters to build. So they don't build some like urban rogue
Yeah.
with lots of like social skills, and like it's going to be more natural for barbarians, rangers, druids. I'm trying to think of another class that would probably thrive. And to a lesser degree, fighters,
Yeah. Fighters, sorcerers.
sorcerers, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, because they're a little more natural.
Yeah, so it's just like, that might govern what skills they want to take, what tool proficiencies. Tool proficiencies seem like they would be much more valuable
Yeah.
in a scenario like that, and that's a big boon where you could like leverage some things that don't often get used, like the ranger's ability to like he has like these overland travel things that make him travel faster or make him understand when something is in a certain region. He has the favored enemy. Like even if someone were building a ranger and they're like, oh, I want to have favored enemy be undead, and it's like, well, but he's mostly like beasts and other monsters. Maybe they're crawling through tombs that have mummies and other undead and stuff, but they probably would want to know that ahead of time so that they wouldn't choose like a favored enemy that's not likely to be in most of the uncharted areas.
Right.
I don't think that that's out of order, it would probably help the characters have more fun because they would feel better equipped to kind of
Hmm.
know what challenges they're likely to face.
I agree
But
with
yeah,
that.
you know, the hex crawl thing is like, 1 to 3 miles, I would say. If you get up over toward like more than 3 miles, like 5 mile hexes, it's like it gets to be a little bit of a
Yeah.
slog. Um,
Well, then
and
perhaps if you want your hex map to be this big,
yeah,
you got to decide because a lot of the times the hexes are like maybe half an inch to an inch
yeah.
each, and if it's got anywhere up towards 150 hexes on there,
hmm
could be a long time.
Yeah, but again, I would posit like depending on what the topography is like. Like for instance, if you plugged someone down in the middle of like wide open grassland or plains, uh, they're likely to have visibility to like several
Yeah.
miles in each
Mhm.
direction. In which case they can go, okay, we know
Hey,
that's
get it right.
plains.
You're going to be able to see out to 5 hexes.
Yeah, yeah. Depending if it's
Yeah.
mountains, probably not.
Right.
If you're in the jungle, probably not. So you could have a pretty good variety of different um, topographies that and maybe provide them some incentive to explore corners that don't necessarily have something that is um, embedded in the adventure where there's like a location or something of interest that's there. But like if they like map out the whole region, then they get like a certain reward, or it's a milestone to map out the
Hmm.
whole every hex, right?
Hmm.
Another thing that I would say is probably prudent to do is try to have something that's randomized. Like if it's in particular, if it's an uncharted region, like an island is great for this because the islands have like they're much more susceptible to shifting weather patterns.
Hmm.
And so you can do something where you like roll every day to establish what the weather is going to be. And that makes each day feel unique. Um, but on the other end of the spectrum, I would posit that you should have some events like that just happen on a calendar, like a volcano erupts or there is an earthquake in this area on this day. And then that can either act as something that happens dramatic if the party's in that region, where it maybe an earthquake could do something like devastate a village, and then the party has to kind of deal with that in some way. But it could also be something that happens deeper into the island or deeper into the region, and it would act as like a honeypot to kind of get the characters to kind of go over there and investigate as to
Hmm.
like what's happening, and what the effects are, and also would be something that they would be hopefully like taking notes on,
Hmm.
like what is the volatility of the weather, what is the like how many external things are happening, like that's useful information for someone looking to settle a region would want to have, like kind of like what things pop off, like so you could have things like that are static, and they might even be with things within the civilizations, right? Maybe there are festivals,
Ooh,
or
yeah.
there are lunar events,
Hmm.
things that just happen irrespective of the PCs being there, and they experience regardless, and they can kind of you can use them to kind of jumpstart the players in a certain direction toward a
Hmm.
certain area, or they can act as complications if the players are in the midst of they're in the midst of negotiating with some tribal chieftains in a village and a volcano erupts. Whoa, it's like a complication, right? Or they're
Yeah.
sidelined and now they have to deal with this thing. Or even establish establish the state of affairs. I guess is what I'm saying is establish the state of affairs before the party ever arrives. So if there's boiling tensions between two tribes, or there's a humanoid, a band of hobgoblins or something that live in the forest, and they're plotting some sort of siege on a village or something, they're going to plot that unless the PCs get wind of it and stop it. And then if they don't get wind of it and stop it, at least make them somewhat aware of it, and then
Hmm.
and then it happens. And so they can work to stop it or they can deal with the aftermath. But there should already be some well established dynamics, either, you know, cultural,
Hmm.
religious, environmental, establish that the the region is a living, breathing place before the PCs ever arrive, and they get plopped down in the middle of it, and they have to learn these things. That's where the fun of an adventure like this or campaign like this would come in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you pretty much nailed it anyway. But make sure that when you're building something like this, any fucking sandbox really, you need to find hooks. There's got to be planted hooks that you have it everywhere, because
Mhm.
like navigating new lands, mapping, finding new stuff, delving into ruins that haven't been that haven't been investigated in hundreds of years or whatever is fun for a while. But if there's nothing that really hooks them,
Yeah,
you know, what would keep anybody on a new island, other than duty, of course.
right.
But these guys are just adventurers that have been paid for a job, or maybe they just found this area. But it's not going to be fun for the players if they're just sitting there being like, yeah, we're going to do our 5 hexes for the day. We'll make our map and then go back to sleep.
Right. By what I'm getting at is saying that, sorry, they're checking my s- smoke detectors here. I forgot they were doing that today. Um, so it's a way of, by establishing what the state of affairs are, is another way of saying that there needs to be stakes in
Yep.
every dollop.
Yep.
And once you get the players, throw them in there and get them invested in those stakes, then they'll have reasons to kind of do things autonomously instead of just following a script.
Yeah, that's one. I think you should have at least 2 or 3 at the ready for each session.
Hmm.
One could take the whole session. You never know. A good encounter can take a good couple hours, and then you have another 1 to 2 hours of role play and actual, you know, checking out the rest of the land. But you need at least 3 good hooks, or at least 3 good events that have stakes to them that are going to keep the interest of the players.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. I think we've answered the question pretty good, and probably threw out some stuff that nobody really cared about when they heard the question. So I think we'll just leave it at that, unless you got anything to add there, David.
I do not.
Then we'll just leave it on a good night.
And good luck.